G'day everyone and welcome to the GameDay Squad Aussie Rules Fantasy Show. I'm Pitty, that's Haz, and together we are the Fantasy Bros. We've partnered with GameDay Squad to bring you everything you need to succeed in GDS Aussie Rules this season. And to help me preview a big round 9, it is the man himself, Haz. Mate, how you going? It's been a long time between drinks.
G'day, Pitty. G'day, viewers. It is good to be back. Yes, it has been a long time between drinks. I've got the night off footy once again. I think I'm at once a month, I think, at this stage, on a Wednesday to be on the show with you, previewing round 9 this week. And I'm excited and I can't wait. And I can't wait to hear all your expert tips and advice because obviously I listen in every week to you. So it's good to be back on here with you, mate.
Yeah, stoked to have you on, mate. I love chatting footy with you. I know I've said that to you as well. And I'm sure the viewers will also appreciate the insights you bring, mate, because, you know, you power everything we do each week, but it's just so good having you chat about it as well. And we've obviously got some regulars in the chat there as well. G'day, Rosso Nero. Good to see you, mate. And Arnie Booger as well, of course, getting amongst it as they always do. And for our viewers and listeners, hey, we've also got somebody else lined up for tonight. We were looking through who are the most informed coaches in GameDay Squad right now. GameDay Cal, so he came to that last week. He was our most informed, but joining us for the first time ever on the Aussie Rules channel, it is Fantasy Bro Dill from the Rugby League space. Dill, how you going, mate? Thanks for joining the Aussie Rules chat.
Yeah, g'day, boys. Thanks for having me. I hope you are. I didn't think you might notice. I was messing around with the title screen in the background there, and I was trying to put you off your game just to see if you could handle the pressure. No, but thanks for having me. I'm pretty pumped to at least have a bit of a yarn with you boys about some Aussie rules before taking off. Obviously, we had a big show. We almost went over time, so we've done well to keep it within that time allocation so that you boys can get on. Fellas, how are we?
Yeah, great, good, mate. Good. And I was a bit worried too. You boys went over time, and then Haz came in and he messed up our timer as well. He was trying to get the show going for an extra 5 minutes. So I was worried we were going to be sitting here for a long time tonight.
Oh, mate, there was some strategy.
I've already heard complaints you guys go way over time and you need to shorten the show. So that's what I'm here for, is just to make sure you keep them within those timelines. Now, boys, I'm here to hear all the good stuff that you have to say about AFL and helping out all the viewers. Obviously, I've been pretty vocal in the Discord about how good your insight is, and it is leading me at the moment to that top spot in the starter competition. And the other thing I wanted to point out before I take off and let you boys do the best job that you always do is that it's definitely not too late to get involved with GameDay Squad. And I just wanted to point out that it from the perspective of not knowing a lot of stuff about AFL, but also being able to just build up my squad over time without spending a cent. I started by just opening some starter packs, getting those bronze cards together, occasionally winning a pack or two through the Discord in terms of the common packs. And now I'm able to put together a pretty decent starter side thanks to your advice, but also I'm starting to get into that contender realm. And I even put together an under 22 side on the weekend. I had plenty of donuts. Don't get me wrong, but I had some cards there that I could actually build that under 22 side. And look, to be honest, I haven't put any money into AFL at all. So I just wanted to come on and show that you can do it. And it's definitely a way to get involved with GameDay Squad if you don't want to spend too much money, is to listen to the experts and follow their advice. And that's exactly what I'm doing. So boys, really appreciate what you're doing for not only Fantasy Bros, but also all of the GameDay Squad community. You are absolutely killing it. And it's all thanks to you guys. It's absolutely nothing to do with me.
That's way too nice of you, mate. You didn't have to come on and say that. You're absolutely killing it. And you're right, to all those coaches as well. Like, if you're getting involved in GameDay Squad for the first time, just make sure you've used that code there on screen, FBAR26. As Dill said, that'll get you started, and you can get that contender team in. You can start winning more prizes each and every week. And as Michael Cossey points out in the chat, g'day, Michael Cossey, absolutely right. Dill is first in starter. It is absolutely unreal. We love seeing that Fantasy Bros logo there on top. Now, Dill, mate, do you want to hang around and tell us how you went this week? Do the around the grounds section for us, or are you going to take off now?
No, yeah, I'll stick around just for the around the grounds. I've got one star and one scar. I think that's the way you boys do it as well. So, yeah, look, I finished 6th for the round. It was a bit of a nervous wait. I was sitting yesterday, funnily enough, I was sitting at my son's school in the afternoon, and he was doing some Oz kick. He is absolutely loving his footy at the moment, and they've just started Oz kick. So I was there watching him kick a footy around, waiting for those scores to roll in from GameDay Squad, sitting there thinking, I've got a pretty decent squad here. I've done pretty well. I must be close to the top. And just a little shout out. You're obviously going to talk a lot about him and why he was so good. But Dane Zorko for me, 145 GDS points, and I had him there in my side. The one that was a bit of a downside was Sammy Flanders, who you've got there as well. On your side of things, he was my lowest scoring player. The benefit of GameDay Squad, though, you have a low score, it drops out of your side, and it's the rest of the squad that makes up your final result. So a couple of good and a couple of bad, but in general, I was pretty happy with how I went. So boys, take it away. Pitty, mate, you obviously want to talk about Sam Flanders as your scar, but you've got a couple of decent stars as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Sam Flanders, yes, he's a scar. That was, he 83, I think, from memory in terms of his points scored. So it was disappointing. 84, sorry. But he only had maybe 4 or something points at quarter time. So he did the bulk of that in those last 3 quarters. So you can sort of take that with a glass half full or a glass half empty approach, but he has been a bit underwhelming recently. And I think he's probably a conversation we'll have later when we get to the forward line there, Haz, in terms of what we're doing with the Sam Flanders this week. And if he stays as a plug and play, we'll get there. We may have some differing opinions on that too, which we can talk about there. But yeah, he was disappointing. But on the other side, Brodie Grundy, what an absolute star. There were actually rumours, Dill, you wouldn't know this, mate, being in the rugby league space. We didn't want to bombard you with this on the weekend, but he was actually 50-50 to play. Like, he was touch and go over the weekend. There were actually rumours that he was not going to get up for his 250th. Now, how true those rumours were, I'm not quite sure, because they rolled out their other couple options they could roll through the ruck, Peter Laddams and Hayden Milliken, I think it was. They rolled them out in the VFL on Sunday, so it looked like he was all good to go. He comes out and he puts up 147 GDS points, if you don't mind. So just, consistent, uber consistent, such a good ruckman for us. So he was my star. And then obviously you can see the finishes there too. I had 5 top 20 finishes this week, which was unreal. And the only comp I didn't place top 20 in was primetime. I don't think I'm ever a chance in primetime, but I'll take that. You can see the best one on there. So Haz got confused with how to do the best finish, but I've got my best finished there on screen, which is 8th in the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown. But yeah, competitive, top 10 in Classic and Challenger, or close to it thereabouts. So I was happy with my week all in all. Haz, how'd you go?
Mate, I just need to, after a while, I need to remind myself how to do things around here. Stuffing up the intro clock, trying to work out how to set up the screen, and just trying to buy myself a couple extra seconds to finish some research for everyone, because I'm running a little bit behind schedule this week. And then other than that, best finish. It's actually finishes this week for me. I'm pretty stoked with my finishes. 9th in Challenger. Stoked for that bounce back. I've had a couple pretty bad weeks there, and I slid outside the top 15. So it's good to bounce back there. And then 11th in Classic. Just didn't quite nail some salary, but pretty happy with my picks overall, which sees me sitting, I think, 10th, I believe, for the season. So pretty happy there. And I'm with you as well, Pitty. I had 5 top 20 finishes other than prime time as well. So same for me last week. And then obviously there on screen, as you mentioned, Dane Zorko, he was an absolute star last weekend. The pig is back from that calf injury. He was good to go the week prior, but they gave him one more week to just rest up and make sure he was good to go for that juicy matchup against Essendon. And boy, didn't he deliver. I know some coaches don't like to play in their first game back from a soft tissue injury, but he definitely didn't disappoint those coaches that played him all across the board. And I bet those coaches that put some salary on him, especially in that Classic comp, would be cheering as well. And then obviously it's probably a bit of a cop-out that Bailey Smith is my scar for last week. I was looking through my team and I couldn't really pinpoint one player that might have been a little bit different from coaches. Yes, Bailey Smith is probably the most popular coach of GDS, but obviously I do own his all-star card, and that was just a bit of a letdown. I played that in Challenger, so still finished 9th in Challenger with that card there. Is a pretty handy finish, even though he did struggle to break that tag of Mullen last weekend.
Of Mullen?
Yes, not Mullen. Jeez, Simpkin. There you go. I'm so out of it.
I thought that, that's an interesting tactic, Geelong tagging their own star player. I thought that would be very interesting. I wouldn't put it past Chris Scott, to be honest. That's something he would do. He'd be like, look, we need to shut down Bailey Smith.
Oh, man. My head's just tagged this week, Mullen on Dacos, and that's the matchup, obviously. So there you go. I'm all over the shop, boys. I'm all over the shop.
We'll chat about that there. Maxie Hanson's in the chat. G'day, mate. Tied 5th with Dill in starter. How good. That is unreal.
I
and we've
believe,
got
sorry,
Skip in the
Petty.
chat as well.
Can I jump in? Max Hansen, I think
Good,
he's
mate.
maximum mastery on GDS, and he's currently 3rd in starters. So I'm keeping an eye on him. And there's also another coach there that I'm not sure who it is, but non-applicable is very close to me at the moment in 2nd. So if non-applicable is around, I would love to have a chat with you to see how you're going as well and what your teams are looking like, because they're hot on my tail. So good luck to those. And Max Hansen, I saw you post in Discord what your score was before the scores came out, and I was looking at it going, I think my score is exactly the same. So it was great to see like minds think alike. And obviously he's a fan of the show, so it means that he's doing just as well. So it's awesome.
Yeah, he's killing it. Actually, I've seen that team name going around a fair bit on those leaderboards too. So well done, mate. You're absolutely flying. And Dill, this is where we may part ways potentially, mate. Thank you so much for jumping on the show. We love you getting involved as well, and you're dipping your toes into the AFL space for the first time this year, and we're loving it. Who knows? Maybe we can have a few more weeks where there's the three of us just talking footy.
Definitely, maybe some more. Tackle meters, and we can go from there. No, thanks, boys, for having me. It's good to give you guys a pump up as well, and I'll be watching and listening and building a team as you have a chat about the rest of the positions tonight. So good luck. Thanks to everyone for supporting the Fantasy Bros as well. Cheers, boys. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate. Love your work. And with that, we'll jump into our round 9 fixtures for the week. Haz, do you want to quickly run us through, mate, those matchups there on screen?
Yeah, so this week we obviously have our prime time fixtures brought to you by Stats Lab. So on Thursday, we have probably the game of the round, in my opinion, is Freo versus Hawks, the top 4 clash. Really excited to see that one. Then on Friday, Pitty, you and I will be in attendance in the Lions against Carlton there at the Gabba. That is the double header again on Friday, Port versus the Bulldogs. So make sure you're all around team news and don't miss any late outs for that game there. That's probably starting at around 8:10, I believe, Australian Eastern Standard Time. And then on Saturday, we have the 4 fixtures. We have North versus Sydney, GWS versus Essendon, Gold Coast versus St Kilda, which is up in Darwin at TIO Stadium. And then we have another big blockbuster, the Cats versus the Pies on Saturday night at the G. And then for our Fantasy Bros Sunday Showdown on obviously Sunday, we only have the 2 games this week, so only the 4 teams to select from for that slot there. So it's the D's versus the Eagles and Tigers versus Adelaide. So I think probably coaches are going to be loading up on some Demons and some Adelaide Crows in that Sunday slot this week.
Yeah, I think so. It'll be a very interesting team. Again, I'm loving that Fantasy Bros Sunday Showdown competition and the squads you can build. I find it so enjoyable because you're relying or you're picking players you don't normally pick in standard competitions, and you're really digging deep into your club and the depth that you've got, and also your footy knowledge too. So I'm loving that comp. As you know, the under 22s comp probably doesn't get enough love, mate, from us in terms of trying to fit everything into one show. But gee, what a comp that is too. I'm loving building an under 22 squad every single week, and again, the strategy and salary that comes with that, and picking those good matchups, I'm finding that super enjoyable. And yeah, some big games this week, mate. I'm particularly looking forward to the Magpies and Cats clash at the MCG. I think that is going to be a cracking game. And obviously cheering on our boys, the Lions against the Blues, mate. We'll be cheering on Will Ashcroft, I reckon, to continue waxing with Lockie Neal if they can get that going.
100%. I'd love just watching Will go at it, and hopefully we'll probably talk about it when we get there. But hopefully there's no tag potentially from a Lockie Cowan.
Something to keep an eye on. We'll have a bit of a chat about that as well, because I believe those team news will have been dropped, and I think the Blues are bringing in a big name in George Hewitt as well. I think he's going to get a recall into the side after some really strong VFL performances, so we'll have a look for that once we get there for sure, mate. Let's jump into our defender previews. We won't hold any longer. Let's get stuck into it for round 9. Before we talk about the 3 options there on screen and a couple points of difference, mate, there's a few things we need to chat about in terms of those plug and plays. First of all, you can see those plug and plays there on screen. I think probably the main point we want to flag there is for Lockie Ash. I think last week he had a season high 61% CBAs, so attending centre bounces. That was a clear role change where he has been attending 0 recently, just playing exclusively off half back. He did have 28% in round 6, though. That was that game where they sort of made that change during the game. But again, he continued to score, and this week comes up against the Bombers, who are the easiest team, or the least restrictive team to opposition mids this season. So I think, yeah, like you've mentioned to me, mate, whether he's playing defense or midfield, he's going to be a lock. But how do you read his midfield role? Do you think that's a positive for him? Is it a negative? Like, obviously, it's a good matchup, but what's your read on that?
I think last week I was more a negative feeling at first. I think it probably takes away those cheap marks that he gets at a 45 degrees, especially if he's operating in the corridor. He's probably still looking to get, 25 plus touches. Probably 20 of those are going to be kicks. But the marks numbers are going to be down, which is obviously going to impact his scoring. I just don't see that role being ideal for him. Like we said, this week, probably a different story. I think he's still a must-pick player regardless. I don't actually expect the role to continue. He came out and said after the game that he probably didn't impact the game as he had wanted and probably as what Kingsley would have wanted as well. So it'd be a watch and wait to see if that role continues once again this week. And obviously, the flow-on effect to that is Lockie Whitfield did get the keys to the defensive line and all ball movement coming out of that back 50 last weekend. He had a season high 11 kick-ins on his way to score 135 GDS points last week. And we just talked about the Bombers being the least restrictive team for opposition midfielders. Well, they're actually the third easiest matchup for defenders as well. So those two boys, once again, are going to be great picks. It's just probably where your salary is going to lie. And I think I might be looking to load up potentially on maybe both of them.
Yeah, I like that. It's hard not to. You almost do it every week, don't you? They're just so reliable and consistent, and that matchup is juicy too. Another one too, just Dane Zorko. We mentioned him at the start there, one of our stars for last week, coming back from his calf injury. How is it they can decide to manage Hugh McCluggage, who's arguably in his prime, manage his game time coming back, and then Dane Zorko, who's nearly 40 years old? He got managed a little bit towards the end, but he just comes out. It's like, no, I don't need to sit on the bench. I'm just going to come out here and absolutely beat down on the Bombers. How do they work?
Yeah, it's interesting because Zorko had 74% time on ground on the weekend. And I think that's what Hugh McCluggage hit last weekend and probably what his fifth game back from injury. So they've been building him up slowly. But yeah, you're right. Zorko just comes back. No, I'm good to go. Play me, coach. And just continues to rack up like the absolute pig that he is down there.
It could even be obviously playing that halfback role. Maybe in terms of the demands on Dane Zorko, for example, that could be different. They might trust him to not go as hard, for example, not cover as much ground. But geez, he loves an easy mark and kick.
I was going to say he doesn't know what a contested ball is. Hasn't gone near the contest in probably about 3 years, Zorks. So yeah, he's just
doesn't know what a handball is.
He's just all uncontested on the outside. So maybe that is something to do with it. They're probably not as worried about a re-injury. Probably might not have been as bad as Hugh McCluggage's at the start of the year. But it's good to see both of those boys back in the team now and both building towards full fitness because they're both elite scorers on their day. And I know obviously Zorko's in our plug and plays for an absolute reason there.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe moving out of that too, looking at those three options you got there for the week for us. So that's our John Noble, Bailey Dale, and Cal Wilkie as well. I think Cal Wilkie, he's nearly, I was saying this to Cal last week, he's almost fits into that plug and play potentially, just how consistent and reliable he's been this season. We talked about the number of marks he's averaging, nearly double digits or effectively double digit marks every single week for him. Are you liking a Cal Wilkie this week again, mate?
Yeah, look, it's hard not to like Cal Wilkie. He got past 100 GDS points again last week, 114 against Carlton, which continues his run, his ton run to start the year. He has the lowest mark tally of the season has been 9, which was against the Lions and obviously in a hard matchup, which resulted in his lowest score, which was 109. But in every other game, he's had double-figure marks. So you talked about it last week, mate, on the show. He's in the form of his life, and I just don't see why we would stop picking him when he hasn't had a bad week to make us go, well, okay, we need to reconsider this. His streak of 100% time on ground did end, though, last week, and he came off for a brief spell. But saying that, he still managed the 98% time on ground, and I think he wasn't happy when he did have to come off when he dislocated that finger. So he has an elite ability to beat his opponent one-on-one. You talked about it last week. He loves to wax late in the game against Sinclair down there. All three Saints are elite scorers, so I don't see why you'd stop picking all three again this week.
Yeah, Yeah, and as we've said before, I think their game style is really conducive to multiple players scoring really well in that system. So I like that. And yeah, it was funny watching him come off last week and he was sitting on the bench because it was in probably the last couple minutes where they were starting to go sideways and backwards and they were looking to just hold possession. And I was like, where's Wilkie? Where's Wilkie? I was looking around for him. I can't see him. That's not right. And then they cut to the bench and he's there on the bench. And I thought, oh, of course it's come to an end. But he's just been, absolutely incredible. So he's definitely in my calculations this week in terms of one of those last defender spots, that's for sure. And I like that you had there as well around they're playing at TIO Stadium, and that game there, we probably shouldn't be turned off by that potentially. In terms of picking a player and their fantasy points there, we saw even last year, for example, if we're talking about a key defender or a defender that's taking, multiple marks each game, we saw James O'Donnell from the Bulldogs last year take 11 marks in that same fixture against the Suns. And, that Suns matchup, it's not amazing, but we have seen some players score quite well against them, like a Whitfield, Amon, Impey, and Roberts, for example. They've all had scores of 135, 138, 124, 145. Like there's scoring there. There's marks potentially still at the ground, and we could be looking at him.
Yeah, and I think we talked about obviously his lowest mark tally of the season being 9. So Amon, in those 4 that you just listed off, Amon had the highest mark count of all those players, which was 8. So I think Wilkie's still going to have another nice solid floor again this week, which would probably be around that 100-point mark. And I think I'm more than willing to happy to take that. Just in the back line, you're locking in a 100-point score every week. And he doesn't have that, well, fingers crossed, doesn't have that real stinker of a game in him, because you're right, it's just the game style that absolutely suits him. Even if he doesn't get those cheap marks, he's still intercepting the ball probably at least 5 or 6 times a game. So yeah, I'm probably locking him in again this week.
Yeah, I like that pick for sure. And another pick you got there on screen, mate, Bailey Dale. We flagged him last week as a point of difference. We had picked out that there was a role change in how they were using a Bailey Dale off that half back line for the Bulldogs. He'd put 2 really good weeks together. And he's now after a third consecutive performance. So it's a third consecutive 120 on the trot, if you don't mind. He's averaging 105.8 for the season. So I think that's sort of positioning him really well. So he had 153 GDS points last week, thanks to 23 kicks, if you don't mind, 7 marks, 5 tackles, another 8 kick-ins, which again, just that was his lowest kick-in tally, funnily enough, since round 1. He's been taking more than that. So he should be good again this week as well. Coming into that Port Adelaide matchup, who are technically neutral, sort of looking at that data, they're that 8th easiest matchup. But we just saw Wayne Miller, who's another point of difference we've got there on screen. He scored 128 last week in the showdown, and he was the key ball distributor, that main ball distributor for the Adelaide Crows. And to be honest, I think that score was looking higher as well at halftime and three-quarter time. I thought he was going to go absolutely nuclear, but didn't quite get there in the end. We've also seen other defenders score pretty well against Port Adelaide in a Tom Stewart, Jarman Impey that had 116 and 129. We saw a couple of Saints do it as well. They had 151 for Wilkie and a 105 for Sinclair. So there's points there, even though it's a neutral matchup. And when we've got that key role for a Bailey Dale, and he's done it a few weeks in a row, someone we could look at. The only thing is that I have been burned by Bailey Dale in the past, and that sits in the back of your mind, that's all. So are you concerned with, is there any risk potentially with a Bailey Dale you're thinking about, or you're really liking that pick there this week?
So you can see on screen there, Max Hansen has put in the chat, if Buderick is named, it could affect Dale a bit. I tend to agree to disagree a little bit to that comment. We did see earlier on in the season, the Bulldogs really were looking to use Buderick in a lot of ways alongside Lockie Jakes. But I feel like in the last couple of weeks and even before Buderick got injured, there was a clear shift that it was Bailey Dale is the prime ball distributor. So it might affect him a little bit. It might take away a couple of those cheap, easy marks and maybe a kick in here or there. But I still think that the flick's been switched, and I think, no, you can't look back now. He's in great form. Like you said, 123 games more than 123 games in a row. The previous histories there, he scored 122 last year, 31 disposals and 4 marks in that game. I'm probably not picking him this week just because of the other options I do like a little bit better, and they probably are a little bit safer. Yeah. But if you are chasing a ceiling score, I think that is definitely your guy right there, because he can pop a ceiling score. That we certainly know that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing too, like with those three options, they're three options we have there on screen, plus the 2 points of difference. But we've got, 6 plug and plays there, or 6 players you could probably confidently play almost every week. And we haven't even talked about, a Dan Houston or a Josh Dacos just yet, or a Jaden Short who could also fit into that too. They're some of our really popular defenders as well. And we might touch on Dan Houston quickly before we finish up. We'll go to the other boys first because he's one I'm also potentially liking this week as well, just looking at last week's performance against Hawthorn. So we'll chat about him in a second. There's just lots of options going around in that back line. But a John Noble, is he tempting you to round out your squad this week? Obviously had a great performance last week in that matchup there against the Giants, and he went nuclear. He went absolutely nuclear there. And he's coming into a matchup this week at a venue that he likes at TIO Stadium, and it may not be chasing points.
Yeah, look, I say it all the time, and we talk about it across all platforms. I know Dylan and Stu talk about it not chasing last week's points, but everything seems to be aligning for Noble to score well again this week, like you mentioned. Did score that massive ceiling score of 178 points last week, 35 disposals, which 30 of those were kicks, mind you, 12 marks and a goal. But that's only his second score over 120 for the season, which probably shows it's probably a flash in the pan, and we can't expect that to happen week in and week out. He's had 3 scores in the 80s this season, showcasing that he does have a flaw that is probably not ideal in the back line when we're talking about, Callum Wilkie hitting 100 every game this season. So it's something to think about as well. Once again, like a Bailey Dale, if you're looking for a ceiling, maybe John Noble's the guy, because he's definitely shown that last week. And like you mentioned, he does like playing at TIO. It's his favorite ground to score at in his career, which is a minimum of 2 games played. He's got 149 against the Hawks last year and 106 against the Dogs in his 2 matches. But he did have an equal high season kick-ins of 5 last week, which was tied with Hewlin for the most against GWS. So they love the ball in his hands. He's definitely waxing a little bit. And the Saints are the 4th easiest matchup. So there is all these little ticks there for John Noble, but I'm just scared about the potential flaw that he does possess. What about you?
Yeah, that's probably it for me. Maybe I'll roll him out potentially in a particular competition, like maybe it's a challenger, something like that, or maybe a contender. I could look at rolling him out. But yeah, it's that flaw. We've got so many of those consistent defenders putting up those scores for us. Like if we actually look at his scoring, he had that big 136 to start the season, and then he's gone 101, 81, 113, 86, 83. It's just sort of been up and down a little bit, and I think we've seen a bit of an improvement in terms of like Bodie Hewlin. He's doing more down back. So yeah, it's just one that I think there's a couple more questions around than the others. But again, I want to be chasing a ceiling in a competition somewhere. So Noble might be one I turn to for sure in that matchup, and especially if you like him too. He's increased in selection this week, I reckon, across GDS coaches. He's currently 16th most selected, so sitting at 11.6% in those standard competitions. So I think that's up a little bit from last week. So coaches might be looking at him for that potential ceiling. So yeah, I think you can definitely go there. And that comment there on screen is a good one. Arnie Booger, will the heat affect them, do you think? And I personally, I'm not sure. I don't think it will. If we look back at scoring from previous years and those previous fixtures they've played there, it suggests it probably doesn't. Especially though, I was more concerned around the maybe like the moisture around potentially. Given those hot conditions, it might just make the ball a bit greasier. The ground might be a bit dewier, for example. So I just think that might have been my concern. But the marking numbers have been positive looking back at that historical data. So I'm not sure we should let that scare us off too much, given that the Saints are probably one of our, better scoring teams, and Noble's in some good form.
Yeah, 100%. I think when I looked at the venue stats for TIO, and I know we're talking defenders here, but just points galore. I think there was an average of 209 points per game from the last 4 games that played at TIO Stadium. So not only are there points for forwards available, like goals to be kicked, but I think there's still plenty of points for our mids and our backs to definitely rack up plenty of possession footy and, play a little bit of keepings off potentially because of that heat, and potentially maybe becoming a bit of a factor later in the game when fatigue starts to settle in.
Yeah, no, good point. And a couple of those points on difference there on screen, mate. We'll touch on them really quickly and then we'll keep moving on as well. I actually do want to mention something about Dan Houston as well. But yeah, looking at a Wayne Miller up, we had a comment there as well from Michael Cossey thinking that Wayne Miller could go off the charts this week. So he's one that you've picked out for us there, mate, as one of those pods. Do you want to talk us through that Wayne Miller selection this week and why coaches might be looking at him to round out their squads?
Yeah, so you mentioned it earlier. He's coming off 128 points last week in the showdown against the Crows, and like you said, I think it was probably on track for a potentially 150-point game at halftime. He had 29 disposals, 6 marks, and 4 tackles. He's had 2 scores of 130 plus this year, which were against the Saints, which are the 4th easiest matchup in the competition, and the Pies, who are the 2nd easiest matchup. So he does like to bully those weaker matchups. However, he has had 3 games under 90 GDS points. So a little bit like John Noble, shows a bit of an obvious flaw when things don't go his way. But, we just talked about him potentially bullying those easier matchups. But the Tigers might seem like a good matchup on paper, but the data actually says they're the 5th hardest matchup for defenders so far this season. So in the last month, the highest score for a defender against the Tigers has been Ash's 128 in Gather Round at the Barossa Park, while other main ball distributors, McCarthy scored 116, Daniel and McKercher scored 109 and 108. So there hasn't really been a whole lot of ceiling scores against the Tigers in the last month. But saying that, the Tigers are his 5th best matchup of his career. And last year, he did score 131 GDS points at the MCG. And that's obviously where they do meet again this week. So maybe the more space on the ground at the MCG does suit Miller's game style. It's the 4th best venue for him to score at in his career to date. So I definitely don't mind the play as a point of difference. But I do prefer the 3 options above.
Yeah. Could you look at a Josh Worrell as well this week in terms of one of the Adelaide defenders? Because that's been my thing with a Wayne Miller. I've typically been looking at a Josh Worrell. I'll probably rate him as a footballer higher than I do a Wayne Miller. What are your thoughts there on a Josh Worrell and how they might compare with one another? Because I find it hard to justify the selection of a Wayne Miller over a Joshy Worrell personally. But again, it's hard to argue when he's playing in that sort of form.
That's it. I think it's pretty much a flip of a coin, really. It depends on who you like maybe more and who might have a potential better ceiling. Worrell does play a little bit of a different role. Like he does tend to maybe lock down one of the key forwards and then try and bounce off as a bit of a rebounding halfback. But obviously, Wayne Miller is just definitely a pure attacking halfback that likes to rack up plenty of the footy. So either way, you could go, I guess, in the matchup. But if you're looking for potential ceiling, I think Miller is probably more your guy.
Yeah, and I like that call. And we've got a Darcy Wilmot there on screen as well as our last point of difference coaches could select. And how good was he last week too, by the way? Like, obviously, that's the Bombers matchup, and we do need to flag that. That could be potentially inflated. That was his highest score for the season, thanks to 32 disposals, 12 marks, and a goal, if you don't mind. Currently now averaging 104 GDS points for the season. That's unreal for Motti. And the thing this week, though, like coming up against the Blues at the Gabba, they're the 7th best matchup for defenders this season so far. We've seen lots of defenders go quite well on them. And the other thing to point out here is that last year, Motti had a score of 168 GDS points, thanks to 31 disposals and 14 marks against the Blues. If you want a pod, we talk about not trying to chase last week's points. Motti is a genuine point of difference again.
Yeah, definitely agree. Even with Zorko back last week, he still managed to score really well. So I wouldn't think that that's an issue for him to score well against Carlton again. It's that little chip mark game that Brisbane love to play. They love to play the keepings off. They love their uncontested marks. And that's really when his numbers start to spike, when he's getting those short 45s in the corridor and looking to really rebound off halfback. The Blues are the 7th easiest matchup. Last week, Sinclair 124 and Wilkie 114. Based there, scoring off high mark numbers, which is exactly what Wilmot loves to do. Luke Ryan 114 and Jordan Clark 102 have had success as well, while the Pies boys really had a day out against the Blues in the last month. Perryman's got 131 and Houston 128. So there's plenty of points to be had for defenders. Obviously, I'm definitely picking a Dane Zorko before a Darcy Wilmot, but I definitely love it as a point of difference.
Yeah, nice. And you can see our picks there on screen. Primetime pod, Logan Evans. Great matchup him this week against the Bulldogs. Sunday Superstar is Wayne Miller, and our under-22 player watch is the legend, if you don't mind, Ryan Marrick. And a few other points of note there, mate. Tom Stewart, Pies matchup, great matchup there. The second easiest for defenders. You could look at a Tom Stewart. I am not. He's on my never again list. I've been burned by him before. I'm not going there. Coaches might, though, pending that matchup. Jaden Short as well. Crows are giving up plenty of points, and he's just an absolute jet, being that main distributor for the Tigers. So you could be looking at a Jaden Short this week. I like a Dan Houston, probably pending what's happening with Jeremy Howe. Again, I'm not quite sure what's happening or why he is out or how long he's out for, but he obviously missed last week, and we spoke about that on the pod. And then he comes out and just goes absolutely bang against a pretty difficult matchup in Hawthorn. So I don't mind a Dan Houston this week, obviously pending if Jeremy Howe's out of the side. But like we've spoken about before, I find it's been hard with a J-Cos and a Houston. One's been up, one's been down. It can be difficult. So, yeah, I mean, I'm probably a Houston potentially, just given recent form in the role, and a lot of chat around Houston as that main ball distributor out of the back line and how good he's looked with that footy in his hands.
Yeah, look, I love everything you just mentioned. I definitely agree about Tom Stewart. When I was thinking about the players to put on screen, and we had a discussion, it's like we don't want to see Tom Stewart up there after he burnt us a couple of weeks ago. And like you said, he's on that never again list for a while, that's for sure, because there are plenty of other good options. Even though it is potentially his 200th, I'm still not picking him, but he definitely could be someone of interest for other coaches. And that's probably just a personal grudge that we have with him recently. But I think Jaden Short for me is probably the one. He's gone over 100 points in every game this season and has scores of 140, 159 and 118 at the MCG. And he scored 130 last year in his match against the Crows. So, and that was in 2024 though. So potentially a matchup there to target. It loves playing there. Plenty of space, like I mentioned with Miller, plenty of options, opportunities for marks. And the Pies boys, like you mentioned, I can't seem to get them right, and that's why I'm just avoiding picking both of them, because I pick the wrong one nearly every week, just like the Freo midfielders. So plenty of other options for me. I'm staying clear of those two.
Yeah, I like that. I'm actually going to quickly add a Jaden Short into my challenger side now as we speak. Let's jump across into the midfielders there, mate. So we can see on screen, I think there's a massive conversation we need to have right now. Obviously, we're keeping in mind the time too. We're trying to go as fast as we can, but sometimes it's difficult given just the amount of really relevant players going around. You can see the plug of players there on screen: Nick Dacos, Marcus Bontempelli, Bailey Smith, Max Holmes, Jordan Dawson. We have 3 great picks. We have 2 great points of difference, and we have one hot boy Heaney as the avoid. Are we is that crazy avoiding an Isaac Heaney this week? And probably more importantly, I didn't put Nick Dacos there as the avoid because it's Nick Dacos. And I just felt that's surely we can't be avoiding a Nick Dacos. But is that a genuine thing this week coming up against Geelong Saturday night at the MCG? Who's going to go to him? It is going to be O'Shea Mullen. Mullen is going to go to him. You could bet your house on it, and he's going to try and clamp him to the nth degree. Are we crazy for fading a Nick Dacos completely from our squads, or should we be sensible and responsible and maybe just play a low salary card?
Look, I honestly don't know if I have the right answer. Right now, I'm probably leaning towards probably playing it safe and just playing the lowest salary. Because we have seen previous scores. Zach Butters still scored 114 against Mullen, so there is the potential there to still score well despite the tag. Sheasel still scored 97 last week. Obviously, Dacos is on another level completely, but obviously it is still scary that he can keep someone like a Bont to a 36, which was pre-injury as well. So definitely one that I'm going to be thinking about over the coming days leading into that match. But right now I'm leaning towards probably playing just a bronze in my classic side.
Yeah, I don't mind that call. We know Bont's, he's beaten up at the moment as well. So I'm sort of nervous picking either a Bont or a Dacos, but I'm also nervous leaving them out. So we'll have to see. I think you're right. It's probably is going to be a Dacos bronze in a classic, and then maybe, as Arnie Booger says there in the chat, fading a Dacos as well in some other competitions. Maybe if you like your 7 mids, maybe you just leave him out. We'll have to wait and see. Again, I'll look at my squads a bit closer over the coming days, especially when we get those team lists come in and we start to see maybe there's an out. There's been an out sort of each week that has sort of changed who we're going to. So we'll just have to wait and see there and what happens. But something to just raise that Dacos will get tagged this week, and we reckon we might even jump to our next our avoid there, mate, because we also think Isaac Heaney is going to cop a tag this week too. So coming up against North Melbourne, I'll put my hand up and I will say I doubted North Melbourne's ability to shut down a Bailey Smith. I also doubted if they'd even try to shut down a Bailey Smith, but I take my hat off to them. They are the real deal in terms of being a difficult matchup for opposition. To pose a real challenge to Geelong down at GMHBA, I will take this matchup very seriously from now on. So I'm very concerned that Heaney will cop the tag, and it's most likely going to be Jai Simpkin, I would imagine. He ran with Bailey Smith last week. So, but we know Fino Sullivan can do a job too, so he's been going to players, and it's something for me. 88 for Smith, I didn't think that was going to happen. So I am concerned for an Isaac Heaney, but just keep in mind, he scored 202 GDS points last year when they met North Melbourne, and that was thanks to 5 goals, because he's one of those unique forwards that can push forward and cause some real damage on the scoreboard and really challenge the opposition when he pushes forward. So I do it with trepidation, but I think given what we've seen from North Melbourne, we probably should be looking to somebody else other than Hot Boy Heaney, unfortunately.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, like you mentioned, Simpkin's probably the target now over those two. He's done a really good job against Will Ashcroft and Gather Round. He's done a really good job, obviously, against Baz last week. So I definitely think that Heaney definitely does get attention. It's whether or not he puts up a respectable score on the board for coaches if they are still keen on playing him. Yes, he can still push forward to maybe power through a tag, but I still think they'll probably have, plan B, C up their sleeve for when that happens, in case that Simpkin doesn't go back with him. So, I'm not keen on Isaac Heaney this week, even though he does possess that ceiling, like you mentioned.
Yeah, no, that's a fair call. And you raised Jai Simpkin, obviously doing a bit of a job there on our boy Will Ashcroft there as one of the selections on screen. So it'll be interesting when we get those teams come out Thursday night in terms of maybe who's in the side. We saw Lockie Cowan do a bit of a run with role last week with Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller, but he also came off injured too. So we'll have to wait and see if he's actually in the side this week. If they decide to tag a Will Ashcroft potentially, will they run with a Lockie Neal? We'll have to see what that looks like. But otherwise, are you liking a Will Ashcroft again?
Yeah, it's hard not to with the form that he's in, and obviously the Brisbane Lions supporters that we are. He's off to a really great start to the year, and he's clearly elevated his game in Brisbane's midfield this year. But that's probably coincided with a little bit of a drop-off from Josh Dunkley, obviously, who's been such a proven scorer for so long. It has been Neil and Ashcroft that have been really racking up the points, especially in that game against the Crows. Carlton are his third best matchup for opposition mids this season, but they're actually more of a neutral matchup just recently, though, in the last 5 games. They're that 8th easiest or the 11th most difficult, if you want to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, we obviously saw, Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller push through that tag, scored his 131. And then we've seen, a couple Dockers as well, Corey Wagner and Andy Brayshaw go 122 and 120. So there are points there as well. We know what Nick Dacos does. Nick Dacos things. So he put up a really big score too, 146. The thing for me, though, this week is obviously that matchup is one I like, but it's the context and it's the venue for me. It's the fact that they're back on a Friday night under the Gabba lights. This is the time Will Ashcroft loves to shine, and it's the form that the Lions are in. They're in great form, and it's the way they move the footy. It's the way they possess the ball. It's the way they use a Will Ashcroft on the outside that I really, really like. And I just feel that if they get that chance to wax, that's what we're looking for. And I've been so impressed with his rise this year as a player. We questioned if he had that ability to elevate to this sort of level at the start of the season in preseason. But it was a good point you raised there about it, Josh Dunkley, and that coinciding of form. So Will Ashcroft had 135 on them last year in round 18. So I'm liking him again for sure, especially when we have a few question marks around some other players and their fitness level or potentially the attention they'll receive. I do like a Will Ashcroft, that's for sure. And made somebody else I also really like again this week. I liked him last week and he was a little bit disappointing, unfortunately, but a Finn Callahan as an option. He had a great first half and I was really glad I picked him. And then I can't remember who it was, but somebody had a spicy take on Sunday saying that he and Clary will both go 140 plus. And they reposted it again at halftime just to remind everyone they're tracking really, really nicely. It did not happen. And I was sitting there on the couch and I went, oh, my team's done. You come out at halftime and say something, it's always going to happen.
Reverse rocket.
A reverse rocket. And actually, I've got a bone to pick with you, mate. You sent the biggest reverse rocket on the weekend, and I am filthy. I alluded to before that I packed a legend Ryan Marrick last week, and and I put him in my under 22 side, and he was on 80 something points at halftime. And just for everyone listening, Harry sends me a message and says, "Mate, that legend Ryan Marrick is probably going to win you the week in under 22s. Well done." And he finishes under 100 GDS points at the end of the game. You sent me that reverse rocket, and I'm absolutely filthy. Please never mention his name again.
It'd be hard not to mention his name again, especially that you've got his legend, but that is very funny because he was looking so good. And just like Nick Newman a couple of weeks ago, when you gave him the reverse rocket, he just completely put the handbrake on and decided, nah, I've done my job. I'm not going to play the second half. So that's unfortunate for you, mate. And unfortunately, you didn't take out the win in under 22s. And that's probably because he didn't have a great second half, but it definitely was tracking that way. But I'll keep it to myself next time.
Yeah, thank you, mate. I think he did that on purpose, and it was Maxi there as well. No, that's all good, mate. It's all a bit of fun, isn't it? And it was a great spicy shout too. But I reckon Finn Callahan could be on again this week if he continues that form. Obviously, coming up against Essendon, they're the best matchup for opposition mids. We saw what the Lions did last week. They gave up 139, 131, and 128 to Ashcroft, Neal, and McCluggage. I think the Giants are really searching for a win too in terms of footy context. They really need this win more than anything. They unfortunately didn't put up the sort of performance they would like against the Gold Coast. They're going to go back to NG Stadium now, and I think they're going to want an absolute beatdown. And he's not going to cop any attention. I think this one could be pretty big for a Finn Callahan. And I said at the start of the week to you, mate, I have concerns about being really keen on a player for a matchup like last week, being a bit underwhelmed by the 114 and taking them out immediately, coming into another good matchup. So I think I'm going to roll with him again, just hoping for that because he has a ceiling on his day. But we did raise a point, mate. He's handball happy, unfortunately. We would love more kicks from him. And he doesn't take many marks regularly. But interestingly, he took 4 and 6 marks in rounds 5 and 3. That's against the Tigers and the Pies. They're some of his highest mark tallies for the season. And he's put up scores of 132 in each of those games. So if he can get that going, even just 4 or 5, I think the disposals will be there regardless. I think he can put on a big score here. So again, I'll kick myself if I don't pick him and he puts up a big score.
Yeah, and if the Giants play anywhere near the style of footy that the Lions played last week, they played a lot of, that chip mark, uncontested style, playing possession against the Bombers last week. If the Giants do that again this week, surely Callahan, can at least get to 5 marks and just get a couple of cheap ones. He does like to push up to try and get a kick in, not a kick in, sorry, the kick from the kick in and get that nice mark there. But you mentioned it, he is very handball happy, and I was screaming at him on the weekend just to kick the bloody ball just so he could get those 2 extra points each time because it was looking a bit grim there in the second half. And I think he scored, I think it was like 10 points in the last minute nearly or so to get to something respectable in the end. Otherwise, it wasn't looking too good. But no, I think you're right. You can't really just go, no, I'm sorry, you only scored 114 and you're out of my side despite a good matchup. You just got to look at what other people have done against the Bombers this year to go, no, he's still a very good option this week. And like Janice just said on the screen, that there is a number of good matchups this week. So maybe Callahan isn't the one for you when you are concerned about his potential to score well and have an elite ceiling. And then there's some other options there for sure. But I think I'm going to back in Finn Callahan again. There's no tag in sight. He's an absolute jet, like you said. So back him in.
Yeah, 100%. And if you want to go a different way, maybe you could look at a Clayton Oliver as well in that same game, playing in that same midfield. We've just talked about how good that matchup is in terms of targeting the Bombers there for those midfielders. And his start to the year has been incredible. It's so good to see Clary sort of back in that form. And I don't know if you saw the highlight or the clip on the weekend where he met Petrarca out in the middle playing for, 2 different teams, and what a moment that was. That was pretty special seeing that. But Clary, he's had scores of 109, 113, 101, 128. Like he just hasn't gone under a ton, and or he's been really consistent, And obviously he had 119 last week in that positive matchup against the Suns. In his last 2 games against the Bombers, he's had 101 and 114. And I would say he's in, a whole different ballpark in terms of his form this year than the past couple seasons. So I think that, we've spoke about how they should really dominate them around the contest, and it starts at the midfield. It starts with the Finn Callahan. It starts with the Clary. I think if you're keen to go a bit of a different way, you could definitely be looking at a Clayton Oliver, and he's someone I'll be throwing in my contender side this week as a bit of a point of difference.
Yeah, look, he's probably one that I definitely haven't thought about at all this season, other than probably Sundays where he's probably relevant. But looking at those scores, and that's probably the first time that I've really looked at what his scores look like for the season, it's hard not to go there for a bit of a point of difference, just looking at the matchup, especially against the Bombers as well. So don't mind that shout from you, mate, but I'm probably looking elsewhere and probably looking at that other point of difference on screen there in an Ed Richards.
Yeah, and I'll let you talk about him in a sec there, but probably the reason why we haven't looked at him, right, is obviously, what's happened in the past couple of seasons, and we've wanted to see the turnaround in form first. But it's also, he hasn't shown a ceiling this year yet. But we know with fantasy players, they don't have a ceiling until they do. And if you're ever going to pick a Clayton Oliver and hope to see the ceiling, it's in this matchup. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, talk us through an Ed Richards. Why do you like that matchup for him against Port Adelaide?
Before I do, I'm not going to say anymore that a player doesn't possess a ceiling, because it's definitely bit me a couple of times so far this season. I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago with one of my avoids, and it definitely burnt me. So I'm no longer going to say a player does not possess a ceiling based on previous scores, because I don't have a good strike rate. So that's just one for the future. And if I do, please tell me that I'm crazy and stupid. Anyway, Ed Richards. Look, Port probably aren't a great matchup on paper. They are the eighth hardest matchup across the last 3 weeks, and probably in the last 5 games, the 7th hardest for the season. I don't think this is probably including, obviously, the most recent round where Sam Berry put up that monster 177 from the 19 tackles in the showdown last weekend. And if we look at Richards, he is a contested beast that doesn't need a positive matchup to put up a good score. Pretty much on his day, he has a great ceiling. Had 149 against the Cats in Geelong in round 6 and 162 against the Lions in opening round. So those definitely ceiling scores are there to be had. Smith and Bruin had 125 and 122 in round 7, while Newcomb scored 114 in round 6, and Garcia scored 128 in gather round against Port. So there are plenty of points to be had despite the hard matchup. The one thing that's probably got me a little bit interested, and I saw a little bit of news, and probably just a rumor at this point, but it'd be interesting to see once teams come out tomorrow. Obviously, we know the Bont is battered and bruised at the moment, and Bevo came out and said last week that, look, he probably does need a rest, just to give that knee some opportunity to heal and recover, and not potentially just keep playing him at 50% all the time. If Bont is ruled out, obviously Richards probably becomes their number 1 midfielder, and that's probably what has me a little bit interested in this matchup. Obviously, he's not going to get a tag. Loves to push forward and impact the score as well. So, yeah, one that I'm keeping an eye on for team lists.
Yeah, I think I saw something today, the Sabo from Bevo, saying that they're going to keep pushing Bont through and play through some pain. He's had heel issues, knee issues, but we've seen how good he is too. So, yes, something keep an eye on as well. We know he's not 100%, but I think, he's someone. I like that scoring against Geelong and Brisbane. Like the fact he can put those scores up against those 2 quality oppositions is probably a reason why you could look at that again this week. Now, mate, before we move on to the Rucks, let's play a game. I'm going to give you a name. I'm going to give you a few names of midfielders. Give me a yes or a no if you'd be keen to play them this week.
All right, hit me.
Jack Steele against West Coast.
Look, good matchup, but no.
Interesting. Form. I know this is. I've just ruined the game by not just continuing the yes. No, I get that. But yes, his form. It's Jack Steele. Caleb Sarong.
No, terrible form.
Lachie Neale.
Yes.
Sam Walsh against Brisbane.
No.
Noah Anderson, if you hypothetically held his legend.
No.
Honest answer? Because I feel like you're riling me up there.
No, that's an honest answer. Last week, in the first 3 quarters, he didn't really look like he was going to put a score on the board, and he
saved it.
He actually sat behind the play as the +1 in defense, and got a couple cheap points in the last quarter there when the game was out of reach for GWS. So no, it's a no for me. His scoring hasn't been the ceiling that we've seen it in the past. And I'm not saying he doesn't have a ceiling, because I know he definitely does. I'm just saying his ceiling scores of late have definitely dried up.
Yeah. LDU, don't answer this one, I'll answer it, but he's the 17th most popular. If you're looking at an LDU, be aware he's having some tests for his hamstring as well. He had scans on that. So there's every chance he doesn't get up this weekend for a game. But the last name I'll throw at you, Matthew Kennedy.
You're talking to his legend owner. And look, potentially maybe if Bont gets ruled out, maybe.
Oh, interesting. I like it. If you've got another spicy midfielder or another name you're keen on this week, chuck it in the chat. We're really keen to see those. But we'll keep moving on now as well for time there, mate. So we'll look at our rucks. We've got another or the same dilemma from last week. We've got 4 options. Last week, the correct answer was Tristan Cherry and Brodie Grundy, with Luke Jackson close behind in third. But this week, mate, if you were looking at 2, which ones would you be looking at?
Gawn and Grundy for me this week. Now, people I know have come out and said, oh, Gawn really saved his score late last week and to get to 120. But I think we need to look at it from the other way. He only had 48% CBAs and he only had 60% ruck contests. It was the injury to Brody Myercheck that really changed, I think, maybe their plan for Gawn. I think he was still going to rest forward throughout the game regardless, but he spent the majority of the game at full forward. And that meant that Max Heath was pretty much the main man in the ruck. But that was until the last quarter, where he sat on the bench for the last 20 minutes. When the game was on the line, they wanted Gawn in the ruck as that man, and they gave him the license to resume that role. He scored 45 GDS points in the last quarter to bring his score to 120. And obviously that included 2 goals playing at full forward. So now that I think he's had that in-game rest, I think it'd be good to go this week. I think his hip's probably a little bit better. It's a must-win game. Obviously a great matchup. The Eagles are the easiest matchup for rucks. Noah Bolter scored 144 points last week in that main ruck role for the Tigers, while Rowan Marshall scored 90 in a shared ruck role in round 7. So they're leaking of plenty of points. Last 2 against the Eagles, 123 at Marvel, which it doesn't really suit his game style. He hasn't really had a good career scoring at Marvel Stadium, but he did have 175 GDS points at Optus Stadium the last time they met over there. So good history against them, good matchup, plenty of points on the line, showed a bit of a bounce back in form late last week. I think the Max Heath experiment's probably over. I don't know if he'll still be in the side. So yeah, I think everything's leaning back to Max Gawn for me.
Yeah, and I think even if he's in the side, it's probably hard for me not to go there, given the fact that we've got Tristan Cherry and Brodie Grundy going up against each other. And I was looking at those scores on the week, and I was watching the AFL app, and I saw in the last quarter there that Max Heath was on the bench for, I think it was 21 minutes. When I looked, he'd sat for 21 minutes straight. So, yeah, is that a sign that this little shared role is over? Something to keep an eye on, and I'm probably still going to go there regardless, just given the fact it's up against a West Coast. And then if we've got to pick out of a Grundy and a Cherry, they obviously play each other this week. I think it's a Brodie Grundy looking at that, and I know you said you'd be going a Brodie Grundy as well. We just saw what he did last week against a Max Gawn. I know that was a conversation people had around, and we had here on the pod around, Max Gawn is a difficult matchup, and Brodie Grundy just has scored well on them in the past. He's a different beast. He's the ruck pig. He's in form, and he put up 147 GDS points, which just shows he can score well despite that matchup. And North, they're the equal 8th easiest matchup for opposition rucks, so relatively neutral there. And they've had some pretty easy matchups of late. But yeah, I think that this is one where we look at what's he done in the past. And, last time he came up against North, he had 146 GDS points. But it's noted that X wasn't there as well. So we've just got to keep that in mind. I still think even with X there, he's a genuine option given how good he is. And they're also playing at Marvel. So he's had scores of 132, 130, and 132 in his last 3 there. It's very hard to go against a Brodie Grundy.
Yeah, so you mentioned that game that he scored 146 without X in the side. He had 62 hit outs from just the 74% time on ground, which is crazy to me. But obviously, like you said, we've got to take that with a bit of grain of salt. In their one matchup last season where X did play, Grundy only managed to score 98 GDS points, and that was from 76% time on ground. So obviously, he's probably averaging in and around 80 to 86% time on ground, I'm going to say, this season. So even that's still a little bit down last year from what he is producing this season. He's in the form of his life. He's probably looking to push for that All-Australian blazer this year. So I'm going to back in Grundy in another tough matchup. And I think he's probably, maybe one of the only rucks that probably fixture-proof.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if you're looking at a Tristan Cherry, for example, just keep in mind the Swans are the fourth hardest matchup for opposition rucks so far this season. And like his last two against the Swans, they've been 91 and 107. Even though his last two games for this season, we've seen some massive scores, 154 and 160 since coming back. So he's got a really big ceiling on his day. But I just think, I'm more comfortable picking a Brodie Grundy, and I feel like I'm less confident in a Tristan Cherry in a hard matchup. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, completely agree. So in those two games that he did go well this season, X has only had 23 and 25 hitouts, and that's despite attending 76 and 83% ruck contests for North. So his hitout numbers are low. And he instead builds his score through that high number of tackles and disposals that we often talk about. So last week he had 30 disposals and 5 or 7 tackles. I can't remember off the top of my head. But he did base his score off high disposal game. He only had the one mark, I believe, last week. So it's concerning that in a game that he might not get, access to potentially a lot of hitouts, and maybe the contested footy might not be in the coalface as much with Sydney, the way they get it out of the contest so well. It does concern me that his tackle numbers might not be there this week.
Ball could be in transition.
And I think Grundy is definitely probably the superior athlete and the runner out of the two. So I think Grundy would definitely work him both ways. So maybe the disposals potentially aren't there as well. So I just don't see a world where he does score that massive score this week. Yes, he might score well, but it probably won't be a ceiling game. His last two against the Swans have resulted in scores of 91 and 107. So nothing to scream, you must pick me.
Yeah, it's scary going against someone with a ceiling like Big X, but this is probably one where, I'm playing the matchup game. And an LJ up against Hawthorn, obviously they're on Thursday night, which is going to be one of the games of the round as you picked out, or potentially even a Darcy Cameron pod. Now, I'm not super keen on Darcy Cameron personally. They're Arnie Booger. Just from my point of view, looking at his recent scoring as well, the matchup where I was thinking of him as a point of difference was Anzac Day there, where he scored a 78 against the Bombers, and that wasn't great. His role's much the same. He's still sharing with Oscar Steen. So I think while Steen is in the side, I'm not going to look at him, particularly when we know what the other rucks can do on the other end of that. If you cop a 78 from a Darcy Cameron, the other rucks just put up their typical scores. That's what scares me. Granted, yes, obviously we've got the X and Grundy matchup there, like we've just discussed, but I'm just not super keen on the Darcy Cameron play myself. But
he also got injured last week. He went off with that ankle, so I don't know how much that's potentially going to affect him this week. If he's good to go, then maybe you just do back him in, but it's something to consider as well.
Yeah, for sure. And an LJ, are we looking at that Hawthorn matchup? Because they're not great. They're quite restricted. They've also got the two big boys there, Ned Reeves and Lloyd Meek. Could we look at an LJ? He's a unicorn, right? He does a bit of everything. I don't love picking rucks or just players against Hawthorn. They are just typically a difficult team to play against. But
look, I think I'm steering away from LJ this week for that exact reason. Hawks are the third hardest matchup for opposition rucks to score against this season. And if we're looking at the scores against Hawks in the last 4 weeks, the highest score has been a 70, which was by Jared Witts. So little bit concerning. Obviously, I know LJ is a different type of player. He is that unicorn for a reason. He's in great form. Sam Mitchell has come out and said that they're going to try and stretch him as much as possible with their duo ruck set up there at Hawthorn. So, look, even with those, the CBA is still hovering around 75% and ruck contests around the same. I still think he's going to struggle potentially to get the hit outs and maybe some disposals this week.
Yeah, it's not great. It makes it difficult picking a couple of rucks this week. That's why I'm probably just defaulting to Gawn and Grundy there. I feel like we don't give Jackson enough love each week. We've obviously got the unicorn, and you mentioned Witsy there struggling against the Hawks matchup. I think talking about a unicorn in Jackson and a dinosaur in Witsy there. I'm not surprised he's struggled. I think Jackson can go a bit better than a Jared Witz, that's for sure. But yeah, we'll see. I can't wait to see us get burned by that one on Thursday night.
No doubt, for sure.
And jumping across our forwards, mate, we'll round out the round as well. We'll do this one. And got it again, our plug and plays. There is a big difference. Somebody's missing. Who's missing? We've got Sheasel, Pickett, and Track. But our boy Sammy Flanders is not there. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Let me actually just get up here. I didn't actually find this. I told you about this. Tell me what is wrong with these scores. 115, 109, 103, 104, 95, 119, 98, 84. What's wrong with those scores?
There's 3 under 100.
Just.
Nah, look, you're right.
In the
there's
line.
Nothing wrong with it.
And he's got revenge game against the Suns. Do you not think that Flanders will come out this week with an absolute point to prove and feast? Yes, I'm concerned by his first quarter last week, or there's been a couple games actually where he's either started really slow or faded out of the game. So I am concerned by that. And yes, I agree. There are some other forwards, Connor Mack, we don't have on screen there, but we really like him again. He's been so good putting up 120s and 130s. We've got lots of players we can talk about there. Brad Hill been super consistent. Zach Bailey shows a ceiling. So yes, there's other players who probably are better in terms of hitting those ceiling scores, but it just, to me personally, happy to take him out of the plug and plays. But I think that this week I'm probably leaning towards playing him just given the matchup and assess after that.
What's concerning for me, and it's probably coincided with some of those scores as well. Last week, he had his lowest CBA count for the year at 25%, and that was down from 43% the week prior. And he's had a high up of 76 for the year. So he was out on that wing a little bit last week. Obviously, we know wings can go cold if he's playing in that position. Obviously, they've got plenty of ball users in the half back line, so they don't need him there. So yes, he's still scoring well, but if that CBA clock is not there, then I'm probably not as keen as you might be this week.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm going off a bit of that revenge game sort of thing. That's again, something to think about and consider if he's going to be an option for our forward lines this week. And if you're keen on him, chuck it in the chat. Are you rolling a Sam Flanders again this week, or are you off by his scores? And in fact, I'm keen just to quickly look at the forward selections this week. Thanks to StatsLab, he's again, now this is a Wednesday night and this can change, but currently he's still the fourth most selected forward, sitting at 28.3% as well. So we'd have to check that again come Thursday and Friday night, just pending which other forward you'd be wanting to play instead of him, and see where he might drop to, because I would imagine he's going to be a little bit less popular getting closer to the weekend, but he's still quite highly played at the moment. So maybe another factor to weigh in there, fourth most popular. But talking about one of his teammates, Brad Hill, how good has Brad Hill been this season? Like, he's just been absolutely incredible, so consistent. Only dropped below 100 once. That was in round 3 for a 95. He's averaging 111, and coming up against the Suns, they are the team to target right now. They're neutral for the season in terms of the points they're giving up to opposition mids, but in the last 3 and 5 games, they are the number one easiest team for opposition mids to score against. So looking at that recent data, this is a team we could be targeting. And his marks have been so good this season, averaging 7 a game. So if we're getting that from a forward, we know we get, again, if he's getting a mark, that's +7 because he's marking and then taking a kick. So +7 points every single time. And he's just so heavily involved in their transition game, and he just can roam wherever he wants. So I think that running's been a strength of his for a long time. He's one that I'm pretty keen to play this week in our forward lines.
And that upper TIO actually might suit his game style as well. So yeah, definitely someone that I started playing a couple of weeks ago, and he definitely hasn't let me down yet. And it's kind of like a Callum Wilkie. If he hasn't done anything wrong, then why should we stop picking him? So, no, definitely, I think the game style suits him. His scoring's there, the marks are there. He's got access to goals as well. It's going to be a high scoring affair. So, no, why not play him?
Yeah, absolutely. And Bales, you keen on Bales again this week after, scores of 143 and 151. And no, not Bales from the AFL Fantasy Fanatics. We're talking about Zach Bailey.
Yeah, obviously we'll be in attendance, and I'll definitely be cheering for Zach Bailey to kick another couple goals and have that another ceiling score, averaging the 111 for the season, despite that anomaly score of 48 against the Demons in round 6. So just shows that he is an absolute gun of the competition. Obviously, future's up in the air about where he might play for the rest of his career, but as of right now, he's probably one of the best half-forward impact players in the competition. We talk about, he's still attending centre bounces, but even without it, he almost fits into the same categories. Brian Myers, in terms of the high half-forward role he plays, works up to the contest. His ability to get dangerous and hit the scoreboard is also second to none. I think he's had 4 games of 2 goals and 20 plus disposals this season, I think, which is just behind Christian Petrarca.
Yeah, wow, so good. And I think just raising that point there about Brian Myers is interesting. He's a test, apparently, to play. They're looking at him and his fitness, and he could be good to go maybe this weekend, but definitely probably sooner than we would have thought, given what the talk was around a potential ACL. So something to keep an eye on is a Brian Myers. I'm not sure I'd play him if he was named straight away. I'd probably like to see what he's like first, even given how good he is. But an interesting point you mentioned there in that comparison with a Brian Myers. The one I'm really keen on this week, though, is a Riley Thilthorpe. I haven't played him much this year, but I just look at that Tigers matchup, and key forwards dominate the Richmond Tigers. They're the best matchup for the opposition key forwards specifically. And they're actually even just the best matchup for opposition forwards season to date. So I think for me, if we're looking at some recent scores against the Tigers, Cal mentioned this last week, is looking to target them. Jake Waterman last week had 139 points from 3 goals. Bailey Fritsch from the Demons had 102 points from 2 goals. Darling and Curtis from the Kangaroos had scores of 103 and 126. There's points everywhere. We've seen players like Stringer, Tracy, Voss, Ethan Reid, Ben King, like they've all had days out on the Richmond Tigers. And given how depleted they are, Noah Bolter's playing in the ruck. I am loving the idea of a Riley Thilthorpe this week. And if you cast your mind back to this same game last year at the MCG, he kicked 5 goals against them for a 130 GDS point game. And he hasn't been in great form recently, but when you look back at his scoring, it actually coincides with those difficulty in matchups. So to start the year, he had 111 against Collingwood at the MCG. He's gone 91. And then he had a few 80 scores in a row, right? 107 in round 6. But then in his last 2 games, they've played some pretty difficult teams in Port Adelaide in the Showdown and the Brisbane Lions at the Gabba. So he's had 56 and 54 there. So 2 difficult games. I think coming into a positive matchup, this could be the round where you look at a Riley Thilthorpe.
Yeah, look, I guess if you're someone that likes to target those matchups for key forwards, like someone like we normally do with Jezza or a Josh Tracy, then yeah, definitely Tigers are the matchup. He hasn't been in the form of last year, which is a little bit disappointing for probably Crow supporters. They're probably all expecting him to be up near the top of the Coleman race. Obviously, Tex Walker's out this week with that bit of that hamstring issue. I think Darcy Fogarty's a test to play as well. So they might lose one key forward this week. But yeah, I don't see probably with Bolter moving to the ruck, probably Ben Miller might go to Thilthorpe as that matchup. And yeah, you're right. He probably should have a day out. But obviously, it just hasn't really shown that yet this season.
Yeah, and that's it. And key forwards can be a hard watch sometimes too when you're picking them in your forward lines. Like it's shocking. It is a really tough watch when they're reliant on those marks and kicks essentially. And probably another player we could be looking at as well. One I'm super keen on as a point of difference, but not many are playing him at all, is a Tom Sparrow. We'll chat about him in a second. He might be a bit of an easier watch potentially. But what about some of Thilthorpe's teammates? We've got an Isaac Rankin there as a point of difference. He's lowly picked amongst GDS coaches, but we've also got a Josh Rochelle to throw into the conversation. Don't forget about Josh Rochelle. Yes, he has not had a great form recently, obviously struggled against the Lions. Last week was looking good at 3/4 time, but did next to nothing in the 4th quarter to finish on a low 80 score, which coaches wouldn't have been happy about if they had played him. Could we look at a Rochelle or a Rankin instead of a Riley Thilthorpe, or maybe even picking two of those three.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think Rankin in my contender side later on, you're going to see him in there. I've seen a report that Rochelli's potentially going to get some more midfield minutes this week, so I don't know what their midfield mix might look like. But yeah, you're right. It's just recently flipped between him and Isaac Rankin. If we're looking in the last 2 weeks, Rochelli's CBAs have dropped to 38% and 19%, whilst Rankin's got a bump to 41% and then a massive 73% last week. So it has reflected in their scoring. And like you mentioned, even though Rochelli kicked those 2 goals 3 last week in the showdown and was on track for a decent score, Isaac Rankin had 95 points in this game last year, and they give up way more ceiling scores to forwards than they do mids. So this could easily be a game where Rankin gets 20 touches and kicks a couple goals when he drifts forward as well. But that means as well, Rochelli has the same likelihood as well. So I can't really split the two this week.
Yeah, and I don't love that either when I'm not 100% confident on that role and it just won't flip around. For example, that's where I get a bit, even though the matchup's so good, that's something I get a bit nervous about. And they're not very highly played, all of them. Like Josh Rochelli's the 8th most popular forward, so he's been slipping recently, so less than 20% played just. And then Rankin's the 14th most popular and Thilthorpe's the 16th most popular. So if they don't quite go well, or that role's not exactly what we think it's going to be going into the weekend, it could really hurt you, but the matchup should be there based on that data. So for me, we've got lots of forwards to be looking at. Some others that I like as well, Justin McInerney, arguably probably should be one of the plug and plays. I probably have questions around his ceiling as well, and the fact that he can be sort of in and out of games at times in his scoring, but he's just been really consistent, and you know what his role's going to be as well in comparison to the Crows forwards, where we are going, it's Rochelli one week and then it's Rankin the next. Well, at least we know that McInerney's in the CBAs and he's a key midfield piece while Goulden is out, and he probably should be required to do more. If Heaney cops that attention like we expect, it's one that he probably should do better in, and I feel like he's the player that the harder the matchup is, the better he gets. That's kind of the feeling I've had this year when he's been playing. We saw him hit his ceiling score against Brisbane. So maybe he's one that, again, we could just sort of put away in our forward lines and not think about it. Connor McDonald, probably in the same sense as well. He's been so good, and I've loved him. His marking game's elite. The Hawks game plan is really conducive to that scoring. So he should be good again this week, even in what might be a difficult matchup there against Freo. And Toby Green has the Essendon matchup at NG Stadium. So a few good options to be considering.
Yeah, Justin McInerney is probably in the same realm as Finn Callaghan, handball happy, and doesn't really make the most of his disposal sometimes, but definitely relies on a goal or two to potentially save his score on a week-to-week basis. Like you said, he can sometimes be a bit of a hard watch. He disappears for long periods of time, but then all of a sudden will do a 20-point play and bring himself back into the game. And yeah, and Connor McDonald last week was just so good. I think he had a nearly 100-point second half to come home like an absolute steam train. When we played Jack Ginnivan. So that one kind of hurt a little bit that we picked the wrong Hawks forward. But yeah, I think even Ginnivan, so reliable, so consistent with the role that they're playing in that system. Like you mentioned, the Hawks brand is just kind of like the Saints, is very conducive to scoring.
Yeah, particularly for those players. We obviously know the midfield's not amazing for that, but yeah, they're unreal, those particular boys, that's for sure. And just keep in mind with Toby Green, CBAs have dried up last week, so he got booted out of the midfield for Lockie Ash. Keep an eye on that, but it's a good matchup against the Bombers too at home. And obviously an under-22 player watch, keep an eye on Aaron Cadman as well. He's been in incredible form and looks like the dominant key forward down there for the Giants. So he's eligible for our under-22s comp. And with that matchup, we probably should be playing him this week there.
Wait, mate.
So, mate, looking at our contender teams, having a look at those.
Before you go to that, you said you wanted to talk through a Tom Sparrow and why you're super keen on him. Do you want to let everyone know why you're keen on a Tom Sparrow this week?
Oh, I can't believe I forgot to even mention about him. Yeah, listen to these scores. We've had 31. Let's just get that out of the way first. 31. Not 31 disposals, just 31 GDS points. Let's just move on. That was 19% CBAs in round one. However, since then, he's had a big bump in his CBAs, so he's been averaging sort of around 65 to 80% CBAs since then for these scores. 89, 130, 114, 93, 74, 137, and 118. So he's averaging 98 for the season, and it's that clear role in Melbourne's midfield. So it's been Steele, Pickett, Sparrow, and Windsor, all spending a very similar amount of time in the midfield in the last few weeks. That's 70 to 73% in terms of their CBAs. So they come up against the Eagles this week, who are the second best matchup for opposition mids. And like even in the most recent, like last 3 and 5 games, they've still been a really positive matchup. We've also seen Kane McAuliffe last week, 121, and the Saints mids, they dominated them as well. So Windhager, Jack Carroll, and Hugo Garcia, 137, 130, 127 respectively. To tuck a Tom Sparrow away in your forward line this week could be an absolute cheat code. And I was trying to find his name in GDS, and I couldn't find him in terms of the number of coaches playing him this week, because it's about like 3%, something ridiculous. So he's very lowly played, and it's actually quite hard to find a bronze of a Tom Sparrow. So if anyone does have a bronze Tom Sparrow or maybe a spare, I would love a bronze Tom Sparrow, because I think this pick this week could be really, really good in terms of a point of difference.
No, I love it. Scores definitely there. The matchup's definitely there, and looks like someone that possesses a ceiling as well. And I know he can definitely get forward and hit the scoreboard. So yeah, don't mind it, mate.
Yeah. I think I'm not sure I'll do it in Classic. I think I might just play, a Connor McDonald or somebody else this week in Classic, but I'll be rolling him out in Challenger potentially. So looking at our contender teams, we'll quickly look at these and we'll get into our BroDown Showdown as well. As you can see there on screen, they're our contender teams for the week. And something interesting I noticed was that we have picked pretty much the same midfield, and not just the same midfield, but in the same order. Look at that. Smith, Butters, Holmes, and then Dawson, Callahan, Ashcroft. And obviously the bench, you've gone Ed Richards and I've gone Oliver. How funny is that? That is exactly the same. And then we've split the pod either side. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, great minds think alike, don't we?
Yeah, obviously. And it's funny seeing our names on the leaderboards. We obviously talk all these decisions through. I reckon every week we're always right next to each other wherever we finish.
Everyone probably just thinks we roll out the same side every single week.
Probably. It's just that microcosm of ideas. And in the back line, you can see we've gone those pretty solid, lock away picks every single week. But as I said, I wanted Dan Houston somewhere. He's just been so good back there. And again, probably another one of those players like a Luke Jackson we don't give enough love to each and every week. Again, not sure I'm rolling him out in a Classic, so to speak, but we'll throw him in Contender. And you've gone your Cal Wilkie there as well, mate. I think that's a really good shout. And then in our forward lines as well, we've both gone, Rucks, Gorn and Grundy, obviously both of us. And our forward lines will be quite similar. But I've thrown a Toby Green and a Riley Thilthorpe in there as well. Whereas you have your Connor McDonald and who's your other one there as well? Isaac Rankin.
Just wanted to touch on potentially quickly. You mentioned it earlier about LDU with his little bit of a test on a hamstring. And even if he potentially does get up to play, Harry Sheasel might cop some attention from a James Jordan this week. So that's potentially one to monitor. Obviously, he got the Mullen tag a couple of weeks ago. So was it last week? Yeah, so definitely one that the Swans might look at there.
Yeah, that's a good shout too. Sort of keep an eye on that. So maybe that's a question of salary. We had that discussion on the pod a while ago as well with Hoss from GameDay Society. We said not sure if we'd fade if he's even going to cop a tag, but just considering the salary you're putting on him, if you're concerned by that JJ tag, which I probably would be if LDU is going to be 100%. Out. Our consensus primetime team, again, I'm just trying to stack as many players as I can here, mate, into this side in terms of what I've got. So I've gone for some big names. Probably the ones I'll pick out. Nick Newman has been a pod recently up against Brisbane. It's not a great matchup, but he's that key distributor there for the Blues, so I like him. Got a Darcy Wilmot, that pod play we've picked out. Hard to go against the Jarman Impey. James Sicily, though, is one that I've got to keep an eye on because he obviously hurt his ankle last week, was tracking really well. One of our pod selections injured his ankle late in the game, and so we'll see if he ends up getting up for that game. But again, just tried to roll out as many of the good cards as I could. And if anyone hasn't checked out the memberships for GameDay Squad, definitely do so, because this is how I've been sort of acquiring these diamonds and these cards, is through those packs you get each month as a member. And obviously with the changes to the legend drop rates, it's mean that we've been able to exchange a few cards in so we can get more packs in return. And we've been able to really pack some pretty handy cards quite quickly with those changes they've made. So it's looking pretty good. I'm able to chuck a team in that has some pretty good salary on it, whereas recently I've been quite struggling, but I'm pretty happy with that side.
Yeah, it looks like a very good side. Anytime you can roll out a primetime team without any golds is looking like a very good side. So Fingers crossed for you this week, mate. I definitely know that you pulled that Diamond Shea Bolton from one of those packs that you just mentioned. So no, it looks very good this week. I haven't even had a chance to even think about putting mine together this week so far. Just been all over the shop, but I'll get there eventually.
Fingers crossed, top 30. Top 30, that's what I'm aiming for. I get blown away in prime time. Now, mate, BroDown Showdown. Let's have a look. And actually, before we do, probably should mention too, Stats Lab. Shout out to Stats Lab. They're incredible. Check out their website as well, of course. And they're unreal. They power all the data and insights we get every single week. And we know that the boys at Supercoach Sword Play are all on that as well. Go and check it out. But BroDown Showdown, round 8 recap. What a victory, mate. I have taken it out again. That is unreal. 2-all. There were a few coaches in the chat last week who picked the 2-all, and it would come down to who gets the highest score. So if you can see on screen there, Tristan Cherry is the highest scorer out of the selections we've had. So that means Pitty gets the win again to take it to 6-3. You'll see that on the next slide. And everyone who voted for Pitty is going to go onto our wheel here that I'll be sharing right now.
Mate, that loss hurts.
You see that right there, Haz?
Yeah, Bond probably pulled the handbrake at halftime as well after that massive first quarter.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, we got Michael Cossey here. So Michael Cossey is one of our winners. Well done, mate. Now, hey, here's what we've gone a bit longer tonight. I want to do one row for Michael Cossey, and I'm going to remove him. This is for a second row of our pack. So I'm going to give away all 3 rows. There's going to be 3 people, and they'll get 1 row each. So Michael Cossey gets 1. And then we're going to have Mel's. Mel's is going to get a row. Got to write this down too. Michael Cossey, Mel's gets a row. And then the third and final row of the pack will go to... Who is it going to be? Is it going to be Mian? Is it going to be Silver Pigeon? It is Mian.
It's Mian.
There we go.
A quick shout out to Silver Pigeon. I believe he's still alive in the cup.
Yeah, semi-final week as well, I believe.
Semi-final week. So best of luck, Silver Pigeon, this week.
Yeah, nice. Now, mate, I'm going to stop. You want to get that pack up as well?
Yes, I can do.
Easy. Now, yeah, and Mian, the myth, the legend. Shout out to the big fella. We've been talking about our FantasyBros Sunday Showdown competitions, sort of heading into each weekend. He's really keen on that comp, and he's been doing an absolutely unreal job each and every week. He's been around the mark, so let's hope he can get a win. He celebrated his birthday early this week. Shout out to the big fella. Happy birthday, mate. And as I said, we've got Michael Cossey with a row in this pack, got Mel's with a row, and Mian with the row. So if you want to open that, mate, and rip it, and I'll decide which row everyone gets.
Let's do it. Can you see my screen on yours? You're good to go.
Can do. Let's rip it.
All right, let's do it.
Here we go. Who can we pack? All right.
Again.
It's getting there. There we go. All righty. I think I want to go. Let's change it up. I want to go bottom row, Michael Cossey.
All righty. So bottom row. Got a Caden Cleary. Semi Layla. There we go. That's a nice card.
Oh, nice. Dynasty and under 22s.
And then Lloyd Beacon there.
Yeah.
Or is it Luke Beacon? Sorry.
Yeah. Nice. So that Sammy Lawler's going to be handy as well. And Caden Cleary is under 22s eligible as well. So you never know. Michael Cossey, mate, they are yours. Can I then please go, Haz? Can we go the second row to Mel's?
Yep.
So middle row.
Diamond.
Oh.
Bell.
Diamond in a comment. Geez, that's handy.
Not bad. And then we've got a gold, Brendan Starcevich. Obviously hasn't quite made it onto the park yet this year, but good pick. Oh, Caden Cleary again.
Couple Clearys. Any tackle meters on those ones, mate?
This would have been a good pack for bingo at the start of the season.
Yeah, Diamond in a comment. Caden, you would have had a Caden Cleary. That is a very tiger. I'm pretty sure a tiger and a lion as well. That's the third one.
Yeah. Jesus, this would have been really handy. All righty.
And Mian, the myth, the legend, what have we got for him?
So we've got a gold Sam Taylor, silver Josh Dunkley. Hopefully he can find some form for Mian there. and then a gold semi-grill. Love, that's a great
that.
card. Definitely
Jeez.
great card.
Jan, happy birthday, mate. Mel's, Michael Cossey, everyone listening as well. Thanks so much for getting involved with the show too. So just make sure that you guys hit us up in Discord. Actually, hit Haz up, please, because he's going to have those cards in his account and he will flick them over to you. And yeah, we can sort that out. And mate, once you take that screen off, I'll share mine and I'll show everyone our picks for the next round of the BroDown Showdown. All right, so jumping across there. Now, again, that's taking the tally here to 6-3 now. Mate, how are you feeling about that?
A little bit annoyed at myself. I probably haven't been putting enough attention into BroDown Showdown recently, and obviously I've got a reputation to uphold after my win in the BBL. So definitely be coming, and I just got to find the right time to pounce.
Well, again, we were joking about it in the off season, mate, just how out of form I was. And I'm not going to lie, hey, that final series last year when we started, it was the most stressed I'd ever been. I was actually like, I can't win a BroDown Showdown. What am I doing? So I'm glad I've turned it around. But this week will be very interesting. We've gone again, another standard edition, so round 9 edition. The defenders, you have Archie Roberts, who is going to bounce back big time this week. Still scored 108 against the tough Brisbane outfit. So credit to him. He's the real deal this year. So he's going to go big again against my Lockie Whitfield against the Bombers. We have your Jordan. Yeah, your Jordan Dawson against my Bailey Smith. We have Brodie Grundy for you against my Max Gawn. And then a couple of the best forwards in the game who are, well, Cozzy's more of a midfielder now, isn't he? So we have Bailey against Cozzy Pickett. Jump in the chat. Who do you reckon is going to take out round 9 of the BroDown Showdown? Michael Cossey jumps in there, mate, with just a cheers, lads. And no, Michael Cossey, thank you, mate, for all your support every single week. We really appreciate it. So it's the least we can do helping you out with those cards. Arnie Book is going to back me in, and we've got Nate Daddies there in the chat as well. G'day, Nate Daddies. He's backing me in too. If you've got love for Haz, make sure you chuck his name in the chat too. I'm hoping, mate, if I go down this week, I wouldn't mind seeing a Zach Bailey big score just to get you the win. I would be able to. I could swallow that if he goes massive. And there we go. Haz, I saw you move to that straight away.
Yeah, got to get that on screen straight away. Thanks, Michael Cossey. There we go. First vote for Haz. Perfect. Thanks, mate.
I love that, mate. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. And again, if you haven't got to go involved with GameDay Squad, make sure we reckon it's the best fantasy platform going around. We love it. All the different competitions you can play. We get to rip player packs and just use that code on screen, FBAR26. Get yourself those 3 9-player comments, chuck a team in Contender as well as starter, and start your journey today. And our next live show next week is Wednesday, 13th of May. So 7:30 p.m. as normal, YouTube Fantasy Bros channel. Haz, I wish you could join us every single week, mate, but I know your team needs you getting off the half-back line, getting some easy footy. But thank you so much for joining us this week, mate. I've loved talking footy with you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, mate. And yeah, I'll be back in probably another month's time. So we'll make that June. I'll see everyone on the next live show. But no doubt, I'll be tuning in every week on my drive home from training.
Yeah, love that. And good luck to those still in the cup as well. Good luck to everyone for round 9. And we will see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.